Hello and welcome to another Bevington Group vignette. My name is Roger Perry, and today I'm here to talk to you about CPS 230, an APRA prudential standard that if you're in the financial services industry, you'll no doubt have some knowledge of, if not a lot of knowledge of, but nonetheless, we're going to give you a perspective on it today. And this will be a quick presentation. The vignettes are designed to give you a very short subject guide on a subject of the day, something that's important at this point in time. Now, before we get started, I would like to pay my respects to the traditional owners from the lands that I am recording from, and that's the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. All right, let's get started. So, as I said, an APRA-regulated standard, it's a prudential standard that has to do with operational risks, critical operations, continuance of delivery, and managing risks associated with service providers. And that's because a lot of the services rely on service providers. And a lot of the operations are actually outsourced to service providers, holus bolus in many cases. It has a broad application. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this because there's plenty available already. And the audience that's watching this probably knows a lot already. So very, very important. And it's coming soon. So the revised implementation timeline was announced April 23, commences 1st of July 2025. That's really not very far away. So there's not a lot more time to be really getting stuck into this. Okay, we want to talk about two broad strategies that we see happening. We see a tick the box, which is get to the minimum standard, and that is a material number of organizations having a crack at it that way. But at least as many organizations are seizing the opportunity. And what that means is if they're opening the box to have a look, for example, at their processes, and looking at processes is clearly an important part of delivering on this, and we'll explain why in a moment. Why don't we, they are thinking, just actually improve the processes while we're there? And that might start with improving controls. What sort of controls? Where they actually are inserted. Are they actually a natural part of the process? And of course, how they work in their own right. But going further than that and actually improving the process for efficiency and effectiveness as well. There are actually two ways to do that, and we'll come to that in a moment. Now, the tick the box approach really means just getting to a minimum standard across governance, policy and process, risk profile, controls, BCPs, monitoring and reporting, and a little bit more. But essentially, all of those do require a degree of process knowledge. For example, processes contain controls. Or controls are embedded into a process. So it's important to have some degree of process knowledge. And organizations are mapping the processes at different degrees of detail. And that process lens is the one we're going to take when we think about what you can do further. It's not the only lens you're going to take, but it's an important one. Now, the seize the opportunity strategy, though, says, well, if we're going to make something happen for the standard, why don't we use that opportunity? Because all change is a form of disruption. So if we're going to open the box and have a look at our processes, for example, to actually understand risks better or to improve controls, why don't we actually do things a little bit more deeply? In other words, take an end-to-end view, use that end-to-end view to get a better perspective of risk and absolutely improve the efficiency or effectiveness of a control. But also, why not just improve the efficiency and effectiveness of a process while we're at it? And that could include things like automation. So basically, forward invest now. Take this opportunity to forward invest for best results. So the delivery of option A or B requires a look at process. And what we're really saying here is, well, if you're going to actually have a look at process, why don't you go that little bit further? And if you are, that approach B, there's sort of two subsets of that. You can either actually note an opportunity and improve it there and then, or note an opportunity and actually pop it on a backlog. And of course, you can actually do both. And most organizations who are pursuing Plan B are doing both. They'll do some improvement while they're doing the work on CPS 230 now, and they'll have a backlog of opportunities that they've noticed. But it is an opportunity to really, really lift your process standards in a world where automation is becoming increasingly popular, I should say, it is a really good opportunity to map, standardize, and improve your processes. Okay. So I did say that I talk a little bit more about why process has to be embedded in your 230 thinking. So, and the reason is that for most of what you have to do, there's a process angle on it. So let's say you're thinking about your GRC, governance, risk, and compliance framework. Well, actually, if you can understand your value streams and your processes, you can understand best how your framework would work effectively or ineffectively against that particular process stream. And very importantly, you can make it clear who's accountable for what, including who's accountable for what process. Safety through detail. Detail mapping will allow you to understand interdependencies. And if you, for example, are going to do a BCP, understanding how a process has interdependencies for a BCP to work is very important. You can, of course, strengthen process, particularly in this case, in and around controls. What controls, where they fit in the process, and how they work in terms of efficiency and effectiveness. Now, if you're going to have a look at process controls and you're at that level of detail, you may as well look at a concept called process debt. Now, you'll be familiar probably with technology debt, and that's where systems are no longer fit for purpose because they're out of date, broadly speaking. The same is true of process. So because of process debt, processes are often very, very inefficient, and that could be 30, 40, or even higher in terms of time inefficiency, 30, 40%, I should say, higher in terms of inefficiency. So that's a lot of waste. Now, effectively, some of that process debt is related to tech debt, but some of it's just there. You can actually get at it now without a great deal of technology effort required. And much of it, no technology, because you've already got it, no new technology. Some more of it, just tactical technological improvement. Other changes will require deeper tech, but you can just put them on the backlog for later. So the idea is, if you're going to look at process, why don't you just look at improving it, not just the controls environment? Okay. Now, so why do we think process is so inherently important for CPS 230? Well, okay, so we've talked a little bit about this, but whether it's governance, risk profile, or controls, there are good reasons to look at process. Governance gives you a better view through process of who's responsible for what. Strong process capability helps you to risk profile better. You can see what the risks are. It's certainly better for controls that you have an idea and process, where a control fits, how it works. Monitoring and reporting, well, if you can understand your processes, you can match risks against them. BCP, well, if you don't understand your process, it's hard to be sure that a BCP will work. And policy and process, well, processes are an expression of policy. You can check that your policy is actually executed appropriately in a process if you've got a process lens. So really, no matter what happens, just basically on CPS 230, you're going to be looking at process, the opportunities to do more while you're there, either improve it when you're there or improve it and backlog some of the changes post the CPS 230 project. The trick is to actually do the changes, of course, and actually lift effectiveness and efficiency, not just in risk, which is, of course, exceptionally important, but across the process more broadly. In a world of high inflation in labor costs in particular, this is important. In some stressed markets, or certainly markets where there's some early sign of stress, this is particularly important, worthwhile thinking about. This pack is available if you click on the right link. I hope you've enjoyed this vignette. I trust it's useful. Feel free to send questions through should you have any. Thank you.